I was working on them out of a place of not good enough. As in, where I'm at in life right now is not good enough. Therefore, I want to achieve this thing. That is so counterintuitive to the entire project. So it wasn't here and now is good enough, or I can be content in the here and now, or enjoy the process along the way. It was once I get there, then I'll be content. Or how to find contentment is through that thing, getting that thing. Hi friends, I'm Shauna. Welcome to the channel and welcome to another video. Today, we are going to be doing a 6-month update on the Contentment Project. We're going to be talking all about how it's gone so far this year, and I just love a mid-year check-in. I love those just as much as I love the beginning of the year videos, end of the year videos. I love the opportunity to come back and to think about your goals and how they're doing and how your projects are doing. I love it. Y'all, I have a lot of thoughts about this year, how this project has gone so far this year, and it did not go how I expected. Like, it really didn't, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but that's the beauty of a reflection where you can catch up and think about how it went, because it was in preparation for this video that I was really able to see the strengths and weaknesses of this project so far. Strap in. I have a lot of thoughts. It's going to be a big old juicy video. Who remembers last year when I was doing the Friday chats? I feel like there's nothing more casual than like hanging out with me on the couch. I have a blanket and like my coffee, and we're just hanging out and chatting. In this video, I'm only going to assume that you have a little bit of knowledge about this project. Basically, like, you know what the Contentment Project is at a baseline. I'm not expecting anybody to memorize goals or anything like that. If you want to refresh on this project and where I wanted to take it this year, my goals, the organization, then I will link you to the original video. So, the original video from January was a reflection on the 2022 project, kind of how I felt about it and where I wanted to go from there and transition to 2023. Some of the main takeaways that are really vivid to me even now are, they're kind of twofold. One, that I was overly focused on stuff last year, and that was a bit to the detriment of the other areas, but also that it was really hard to work on multiple areas at a time, especially the who I am and where I'm at categories. So those are the two larger categories, ones that require more internal work and more thoughtfulness, kind of the more difficult areas. And you could sprinkle in a little bit of like what I have and stuff related content or projects, but I could only really focus on one of the three at a time. And so in 2022, I really focused on the who I am category, and I had some great success there. And so what that meant was I really wanted the where I'm at category to be a focus of this year, and that is what I focused on in the first part of the year. So how did it go? Oh gosh, there's so much to say. The TLDR of it all is that I girl bossed my way into burnout. At the beginning of the year, I was, all of this stuff I've kind of like said throughout, and you can kind of see elements of what I'm about to say throughout the year so far. I was waking up at 6 a.m., 6:30. I was working and I was hustling, grinding so hard. I would get up at 6:30. I would do 2.5 to 3.5 hours of work before I started my job, just depending on how early I got up. And then I would finish work and I would work until about 9:30, occasionally 10, but usually 9:30. If I was going to the gym, then I would go to the gym at that time, do some work before, do some work after. I was finding every pocket of time in my day to do work. And on occasion as well, I was sprinting between 9 p.m. and midnight with my partner. We did a handful of those, and I actually did really love those times together and working. But what was happening is I was getting up at 6:30, and then working until midnight. Like, you're working a 9 to 5, And then I was also working an additional 6 hours some nights on top of the 9 to 5. It was a lot of work. And I'm not trying to say that like hustling or grinding is a bad thing. I was doing it too much, and I was pushing myself a lot. But where the real problem kind of was the mental space I was in. I felt like shit for most of the beginning part of the year until I took a break in April, which we'll talk about. I was just feeling like shit constantly. I'm not working hard enough. I'm not doing enough. And I was always feeling like I could have done more. And I was also setting goals where it's like, you should have hit it. Like, why didn't you hit it? You should have been able to do that. And I'm not even talking about like numbers in the sense of like, oh, I should have gotten 3,000 subscribers this month, or I should have made $500. It was like, I should have been able to do this amount of work today, or 2 hours of work today. Why didn't you do it? Or I should be going farther. I should be getting more done. Why aren't you doing it? And then that slowly transitioned into, you're not good enough. You can't do it. Who would buy things from you? Who would shop from you? Who would do this? Those like are pretty standard mental narratives or stories that I would tell myself. And they just kept like coming, cropping up all the time. It was getting harder and harder to shut that down. And so I really felt like I was creating from this like anxious, nervous / not good enough kind of negative headspace. It's hard to do your best work, your most creative work, when you are doubting yourself, when you are in an overall negative headspace. I was so hyper focused on hitting goals, on like hitting numbers, hitting milestones, hitting objectives. I was losing sight of a lot and then feeling really bad when I didn't do that. And I was trying so hard, almost to the point where it felt a little bit like desperation in a way. And I think you can hear some of that come out in videos. Like there was a video that I made where it was like, if you're feeling behind in life, and I was feeling behind as like where I should be at almost 29. But then also there was this feeling of I'm not getting enough done in a day, and I feel behind in the year and like where I want to be with my goals. And so I was feeling like that. And then I was telling myself, it's okay, you're really trying your best, you're doing your best, while also grinding relentlessly. Like you can't tell yourself like to be gentle with yourself while also grinding yourself into the ground. Like those two can't coexist together. And that is what was happening. And all of this really feels like a big piece of irony. All of this feels very ironic. And I'm giving you context for this ultimate point. When you think about the contentment project, right? I want to be content with who I am, where I'm at, and what I have. You can have goals for yourself. You can be striving towards something, but you can also be content with where you are in life and also enjoy the process of achieving or working hard. It doesn't have to be this like self-sacrificing struggle. And I wasn't working on these projects, and I can say with hindsight now that I wasn't working on these projects out of a place of contentment or happiness, or like I want to achieve these things for self-betterment, or I really believe I can achieve these things, or working on them out of a place of self-love. I was working on them out of a place of not good enough. As in, where I'm at in life right now is not good enough. Therefore, I want to achieve this thing. That is so counterintuitive to the entire project. Like, we don't have to hate who we are or hate what we're doing in order to aspire to be, or aspire to change, or aspire to something else. I was measuring my effort by my success, or the way that I was measuring my effort was through success. And then I was getting really frustrated when success wasn't happening. And I forgot some conversations that I used to have with students all of the time. And all of this came rushing back as I was preparing for this video. And there's two things I want to share with you. One would be when students came into my office and they would, because they got a grade on a paper, and they would say, Shauna, I worked so hard on this paper. I don't understand why I got this grade. And they see the fact that they worked harder than normal, that they put in more effort and more work. And the fact that their grade didn't reflect that seemed amiss to them. As in, if you work harder, you automatically get rewarded. Your effort doesn't inherently equal the outcome. Just because you worked harder doesn't mean you'll be more successful. We tell ourselves that all the time, and there's this like mantra in, I feel like, North American society where it's like, work hard and you'll be rewarded. There are many places and times in life where that's simply not true, and what really is rewarded is on target work, smart work, work smarter, not harder kind of thing. And I was doing that. I was working so hard, harder than normal, and then getting really frustrated when my rewards, my successes weren't matching my efforts. And the second thing would be when students would come into my office and they were just so upset about a grade itself. Funny enough, it was usually a 73 that would upset the students most. And they would come in and they would just be like, I don't get it. I'm not a 73 student. I don't get 73s. And they were upset about the number itself. They were an 80 student or a 90 student. Anything other than that was upsetting and also unreflective to them of where their grades are and also like who they were as students. And I think in that sense, there are students who have come to define themselves by their grades. I was no different. And when I would talk to these students, there were often a number of times where students could not separate the context from the grade, where it's like, put your grade aside for a second. Like, let's just ignore that for a second. Let's look at the quality and the content of the assignment. Let's look at the feedback. Let's look at your thesis. And then we can come back and then maybe we can match those things up. Or maybe we can look at it as if your friend wrote this or this paper was turned into you by somebody else. I was doing the exact same thing in this context as well. I was unable to separate the context from the grade, which should be the result. Let's look at all of the things that we're doing. Let's look at all the things surrounding this grade. Let's look at the feedback. And another piece of irony, I talked a lot last year, like the end of last year, and even some of this year, about how obsessive I was last year, the early part of last year, with like the numbers and quantifying and tracking. And like I was so obsessed with everything that I bought, and it was too much. I was obsessing over every last cent. I was doing the exact same thing, but with my time, but with my goals. I was obsessing over every second instead of every cent. I was getting stressed out about a $4 or $5 deodorant last year, and now I'm getting stressed out about not spending 5 minutes properly, or not, hitting every little micro level goal, from making my bed to earning a certain amount of money. It was just the same habits or the same problems of last year that were resurfacing, but in this area. And I did not see it at all until I was preparing for this video. I was like, oh, how funny that this thing that stressed me out in 2022 is back doing the exact same thing. And I've just found new things to obsess over. And what I think also really contributed to this problem was breaking down every single goal I could have into micro goals. Like if you want to save $20,000 this year, this is how much you need to save a day, or this is how much you need to save a month. I was doing that for like everything. If I want to write 20,000 words or 100,000 words, here's what I'd have to write. If I want to do this thing by September, here's what I have to do every day. I had super lofty goals that were unreflective of the amount of time that I had. And when I look at the past 6 months, what is perhaps the most frustrating is that I started this project with the intention of contentment behind it and really fostering that contentment year, but enjoying the process and doing things out of a place of contentment was lost so quickly. And one of the ways that this played out in my mind, or the way they justified it, was when I achieve this thing, then I will be content. Or the way that I can find contentment is through this thing. So it wasn't here and now is good enough, or I can be content in the here and now, or enjoy the process along the way. It was once I get there, then I'll be content. Or how to find contentment is through that thing, getting that thing. And what that does is it's an external factors, or looking outside of yourself, looking outside of your job or your career or your home or whatever. And you're looking at other things that you don't have to make you content. This is kind of what I've described about with like makeup and shopping. If you're always looking for the next thing, the newest, nicest next thing, you're never looking at what you currently have and like appreciating it. The same thing applies to your career or your job or like your home or your marriage. If you're always looking at other people's relationships, other people's finances, other people's careers, are you ever really appreciating who you are, what you have, where you are in your career, or where you are with your finances or your marriage or things like that? Because there's great things about where you are at in life as well. And if you are striving to change, or you are striving to grow, learn, and evolve, you don't have to do that out of a place of hatred or you're not good enough. And so all of this like stress and pressure, like there was so much pressure and stress on myself that was only created by me. That's also the funny thing, is if I chilled out, I dialed back the intensity, I dialed back the goals, dialed everything back, I could have just like maintained a slower pace across 6 months instead of hustle really hard for 3, burn out for 2, and then just be paralyzed and not sure where else like to go from here for the next one. Because now it kind of feels like I'm starting over again. And it's like, oh, I have to start and rebuild momentum. I have to jump into projects that I haven't touched for 3 months. It's like you have to recreate goals. You have to recreate timelines. You have to recreate trajectories and like reevaluate everything, which takes time, when in reality, it could have just been going on since January. So I feel like that really encapsulates the where I'm at in life category. When it comes to the who I am category, this is also a bit of a funny story too. I started the Artist's Way at the end of February. It was like maybe the very last day of February, the last couple of days of February. And that was very much a who I am project. And I had also been doing like 1 line a day at the beginning of the year. What I learned is that there is such a thing as too much self-work, too much thinking, too much analyzing, too much just like almost like navel gazing, like thinking about yourself and your problems. By the time March rolled around, my morning routine, actually just not even morning routine, like getting out of bed took an hour and a half because I was reading The Artist's Way. I was doing the exercises. I was journaling. What else was I doing? Oh yeah, I was doing 1 line a day. It was taking forever. And I was being critical and reflective about every aspect of my life. There is such a thing as too much self-improvement and too much self-reflection. You don't need to analyze every little thing about your life, every little mistake that you've made, every little thing that you say to somebody like every action that like maybe shouldn't have happened. You don't need to do that for everything. Because what happens is that every little thing, something that might actually just be truly small, becomes a big thing and somehow representative of some kind of deficiency. Like you didn't absorb information that your friend told you, or like maybe you were a little rude and snippy to somebody the other day. Sometimes you just have a shitty day. And like that's the only place you need to go with it. As I was saying a couple weeks back, sometimes a scrunchie is just a scrunchie. Sometimes a bad day is just a bad day. Could you go in and dissect it? Yeah, sure. But you don't need to every single time. It can be exhausting, y'all. Sometimes the play is just to let it go, move on. You don't need to address every little thing. And in my last video, I was talking about books and that I'm kind of on a pause from the self-development books for a while. This is why. I'm just really exhausted about it all right now. And in the past, maybe last year, I was, seeing like TikToks and reels about people who are saying like your entire life doesn't need to be consumed by healing and self-development. I'm now realizing that you don't have to be improving literally every second of the day for days, years, months, whatever. And I can tell you now, I'm not in the headspace where I would be open and accepting of messages that would actually benefit me. And that's fine. I don't have to be in that season all the time. I can take days, weeks, months, even a year off of this kind of content, and I can come back to it at any time. And that's the beauty of life and us as people. We go through different seasons. We're allowed to put stuff on the back burner and come back to it, and it's totally fine. And so I think when I look back at the last 6 months, I haven't really done many contentment projects. And there's a few reasons for that. Number one, when it comes to contentment of the stuff, I feel like I've found my rhythm and it's kind of second nature. And contentment projects are almost unnecessary in that realm. When I get bored of my makeup, as an example, I can create an everyday makeup bag, an everyday makeup container, layout, something like that. And I've been doing that for years now at this point. I don't need to be putting in a contentment project or scheduling in some time to do that. Kind of same thing with clothing. I've bought approximately 5 pieces of clothing this year in 6 months. If I maintain my trajectory exactly as it is and buying 5 more pieces of clothing in the second half of the year, I'd be fine with that. Like that'd be perfectly fine with me. Now, I don't know what fall winter is going to look like, if I'm going to maintain that more, less, who knows. But I don't really feel like I need a contentment project in order to be on top of contentment with a lot of stuff categories. That's not to say that they can't ever be helpful, because there are moments where I feel spendy, where I want to buy stuff where I'm like, yeah, let me cheer myself up by getting this thing. I always have them in a back pocket if I need to, but I haven't really felt that way so far this year with stuff. Contentment projects of the self, like who I am, I feel like most of those need to go back, like need to be on the back burner for a lot of the reasons why I've talked about with like the self-development and the reading and stuff like that. I just like don't need that at this particular moment. And then when it comes to the where I'm at in life, I feel like that's the area that needs the most attention, but through a different perspective or different lens than I was going at it at the beginning of the year. And I think overall, there needs to be a gentler approach in that category. I think the next 6 months are going to be about finding that balance in the where I'm at category. Working towards goals and achieving goals that are important to me, but not working 12 hours a day, not pegging my identity and my self-worth onto like numbers and outcomes. Like you're allowed to try things and you're allowed to fail or not be as successful as you want to be, And that doesn't have to mean that like you were a shitty, uncreative person, or that doesn't mean that you couldn't ever achieve that goal ever. It just means like maybe not right now. Maybe you try something else. And so there is work to do in finding balance is what I'm trying to say. And the like where do we go from here? I'm honestly not sure. And I don't say that out of like sadness or like I feel lost or confused. No. I feel a little uncertain as to like how to approach the balance. And I think uncertainty is actually a really great place to be in because when we don't know, that's when we are our most creative or our most, or maybe I don't want to say generally speaking, but for me, that's when I don't know, okay, I don't know what the next step is. I don't really know what the play is here. That's when you'll go looking for answers. And that's when you try something. And that's when you try, iterate, try again, iterate. And that's how you come up with answers is by asking questions. How do you find the balance? Where do you go from here? Well, the only right next step is to try something. So I feel like the immediate next steps of where do I go from here? How do I find that balance would be to, acclimatize with the surroundings again. What projects do I want to achieve? Why do I want to achieve them? And then like what would be if I could only achieve one thing by the end of the year, what would it be? One thing. And then you can help set your priorities. And I think there are probably like further reflections on what worked about what I was doing before, what was good about it, and what wasn't good about it. And then that can help me create or find that plan of action to attack these goals that I am like passionate about achieving. And then I think the follow-up question would be, why are these things important to me? Why do I want to achieve them? And then I think like a secondary next step would be really working on like positive self-talk / I believe in myself kind of mentality and cultivating that. I do want to marinate on this a little bit, and I think editing Shauna might have some thoughts to add in once she's watched back the footage and has had time to immerse herself in these ideas and maybe even done some, reflecting herself. That's the video, and that's where we're sitting at the Contentment Project. And this year, or this update, really took a turn I didn't expect. When I look at the last 2 years, I feel like everything has kind of gone according to plan. Or let's say, even though things didn't go perfectly, I was able to iterate really quickly, or the problems were small. This feels like a larger moment, a larger bump on the road, that there's a real opportunity here to iterate in a major way, because I feel like this is a moment, like this is a really important moment. Anyways, thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me today. If you are doing a contentment project yourself, I would love to know how it's going. What have you been working on? Have you been doing contentment projects? Love to hear about it in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again around here soon. Bye.